us here. I think we're fortunate to have her with us today, especially as she has to run off afterwards to teach class. But please join me in welcoming Cheryl to our seminar today. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks very much. Talking about how, I can't remember how many years they're at the Investigators Conference. That was a lot of fun. So I'm really glad to get to spend a little time with Jeff and all of you today. Do I have slides or not? If I don't, it's okay. Close my laptop and we'll keep going. I can talk without slides. So. I also have the HDMI right here. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, so that should hopefully solve it. There we go. Let's see. I have an insane amount of slides, so good if I could get this. I think we're going to get there. So I'm going to fill space. Well, I've been at Stanford since 2014, and I came here from the Seattle Times. Investigative data, became the deputy investigations editor, and then became the data editor, which they gave me because they didn't know what to do with me. And I worked with data across the whole newsroom. It's interesting. I've had that title in almost every newsroom I've worked at over years. Lots of places. I've had data enterprise and data innovation, which is when editors don't exactly know what you do, but they know you're working with numbers and it's important, which is good. So, what do we think? Am I going to connect or not? Because I'll just keep going, and then we can go from there. So if it shows up at some point, that's great. I have a Big Local News sticker somewhere here on my laptop. You can see I have extras, so if you want, I'll leave a little stash of them. Sometimes people like stickers, so. So I came to Stanford with the idea of Big Local News. In fact, I talked about it when I visited here before I actually took the job. And then my first year, I had a class of students, and I wanted to teach them how to request data at scale. And so we decided to go after police stop. It's now the largest repository of police stop data in the country. And we also, and I worked with an engineering professor, Shard Goel, who is now at Harvard, to build a new measure of discrimination using a kind of new statistical test. So he published we published several papers together. I say his group really published, I helped. And we trained 200 journalists on how to use the data for stories. So the reason I tell that story is because that's the intersection of what we're talking about here. We're talking about being able to find new ways to collaborate and leverage up data to be able to drive important accountability journalism. And so that's what Big Local News is all about. So we have a platform called biglocalnews.org. It does have a login, but it's free. Any of you could go there and log in. We have 101 open projects. We have many, many more private projects. So what is a private project? It means you can go in, you can create a project, and stash your data there. You can share it with just people you want to share it with. Then, and it's geared toward journalists. If you're a journalist and you're like, okay, I'm ready to publish my story, and it was all based off this data, you can open that project up and make it available for other journalists to do similar stories. And you can write something called a reporting recipe or reach out to us and we'll help you. And then that helps the journalists know exactly what to do. That's a big part of what we do, that platform. We have another platform called agendawatch.org where we're scraping local government agendas in minutes at scale. Again, the idea is to bring in information easier for journalists and others to access that information, to find noteworthy patterns. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do with Agenda Watch. Right now we have just a couple hundred, local agencies, city councils in there, but we think, I might get corrected by my managing director sitting in the back, but I think by the end of the year we might have in there. And that's because we're targeting the platforms that publish for local agencies, and so and pulling in those records. And so once we get one platform, We get lots and lots of agencies. So that's the goal with that. Think about how to bring together, again, this nexus of computation, of academic rigor, we call the DART matrix. So DART is a matrix that actually I co-developed with Professor Jay Hamilton, who's now Vice Provost here of undergraduate education, but he's also the director of the journalism program. So we spent some time thinking about the capacities of newsrooms and what they need to be able to do important local journalism. The data expertise of a newsroom as a measure. So if I'm in a small newsroom, and there's a lot of small newsrooms, more small than large, and newsrooms have been shrinking in size. I probably don't need to tell you that, like, we're in a local news crisis. There's a lot of news deserts out there. So there's a lot of places that need extra help. So if you're a small newsroom, you have expertise and capacity, then if I say, hey, I have this data set of all of the police stops across the U.S. or something like that, here you go, I'm going to shrug my shoulders because there's nothing I can do. Have a little progress here, perhaps. We'll see. So you're like, that's not going to be helpful to you. So if I can give you a slice of that data that is relevant to your community and even teach you, here is a spreadsheet, here's how to sort it, here's how to filter it, and maybe even bring you along to something like a pivot table or a group by query, then I got you. Like you're like, oh, here's this relevant story. That's great. And if I'm at a newsroom that has a lot of data expertise, like the New York Times or ProPublica, I don't need your reporting recipe. I might even have data myself, or I might want a little help leveraging the data collection that we're doing, because even the big newsrooms are stretched. So maybe we work together on something, collect data, turn it around. The thing about those big newsrooms is they can build things on top of data streams that will be useful for them. So they like the data feeds, and they really like to be able to say that they've had impact in their work. So if I have a national data feed or story, if I can share it out with local newsrooms and get Big Local's help to build out a reporting recipe, then I can point to lots of local stories that came out of the work that we did, and that's a good thing. So I have a couple of examples of that. Today did a story on nursing home staffing guidelines. There were new guidelines when President Biden was in office that said we don't have enough people caring for our elderly, and it should be at this level. And so we basically, the USA Today reporters did a national investigation to see how many nursing homes were actually meeting those guidelines, how many of them were not. And so they did that story, good national story, terrible map, but I digress. And then they happened to put the data, seeing if we have progress. They happened to put the data in Big Local News. They just, like one day, I was just checking the platform, and I see this new open project from USA Today, and it had all of the data for every nursing home in the country. And so I just reached out to the reporter, who's a data reporter, and I said, hey, would you like to do a webinar? We can pay you a little stipend. So she was like, sure. And she checked with her editors, and they were like, this would be great. And we have a partnership with the Rural News Network, which is part of the Institute for Nonprofit News. So it's lots of little small newsrooms that get extra support from us. And so we partnered with them. We did a webinar. We showed them how to analyze the data. We helped them build visualizations with the data, because I mentioned that bad map, so we wanted something better. And we helped them publish stories. Okay, now I'm going to really speed through some slides here. This is us. I already shared that. Oh, we do have over 5,000 users. There we go. Oh, man, we were there. It was exciting. Okay, I'll just keep talking. So we did that story. We did that work. and about a dozen local newsrooms did stories about the problems with their communities and nursing homes. And, there's a reason that is important. We want, of course, national change. Everybody wants national change, but often change comes up from the local level. You get people upset about their grandmother in a nursing home that is understaffed, and you start seeing more of a groundswell. So USA Today was happy, we were happy, the newsrooms were happy, and we felt like we had more impact. So that's one example of kind of the way that we try to leverage, especially we have those newsrooms in that DART matrix of the small capacity, and then we have the newsrooms on the other spectrum of the larger capacity, and how we can kind of have this virtuous cycle happening. So the DART matrix is basically data, algorithms and tools, reporting recipes, and training. And so it's based on that we give them more reporting recipes and tools if they have zero capacity, and we give them more data and also sometimes tools if we have a lot of reporting capacity. And we try to make sure that we're meeting kind of across that matrix, we're meeting those needs. So that's the aim of what we try to do. One of the other things that we, I'm gonna cheat and look through my slides. One of the things that we're trying to do with this, though, is that we're not the only nonprofit or kind of service organization trying to help local journalists. There's a lot of us. And so the other piece of this matrix is how can we work together to build a foundation to support local journalism. And so the idea is that building a kind of a technical and collaborative foundation. We're moving beyond this age of competition. I mean, not that the New York Times and the Washington Post aren't still competitive with each other, but more often than not, they might actually, well, I don't know about those two, but like a lot of places are really willing to collaborate because they can see bigger impact, because like following that idea of the DART matrix, collaboration can get you further than competition. And it's the same way with the support organizations. We work with a lot of organizations that support local journalists in ways that we don't have the capacity to do that. We're focused on data and computation. Muckrock focuses on public records access and filing public records requests and getting documents back. They run a service called Document Cloud, which allows you to bring in big troves of documents, publish them, annotate them, do all kinds of things. We actually work with them a lot. In fact, one of the ways that we've collaborated with Muckrock is that they have a login system that we use. And it makes it really easy. So why should my engineers spend time building on a technical login system when there's one already available, right? So that we're trying not to remake the wheel in a lot of places. And so that's one of the other kind of really important components about this. So when I think about the DART matrix, in practice it looks like we have a lot of data. We're making that data available on our platform. I'm going to give another example of one of those ways it works. I'm going to forget the name of there was a European, I think it's called Sunlight maybe, I can't remember. There's a European nonprofit investigative outlet, and they collected brain waste data, basically data looking at immigration, and if I'm really well qualified in one country and certified, but then I move to another country, I can only get a job as a taxi driver, is like the simple way to put it. And so they collected all of this data. They built this incredible report off of it that was global in scope. Then they put the data in our platform. We invited them to write a reporting recipe. We lightly edited it, put it up, and helped them get the news out about that. And so then we've seen a lot of other European news organizations do stories about brain waste. That wouldn't have happened otherwise. So that's another example of like getting data and reasonable bites or tutorials on how to manage and use the data for stories. Another thing that we do with data that we've been doing recently is we've been working with the Data Rescue Project and other organizations to collect federal data that we're worried is going to go away, and that we can make sense of. The Data Rescue Project and all of the folks who are doing that are definitely focused on getting federal data, any data, and just archiving it and preserving it. Very, very important. Our focus, so again, we don't want to recreate that wheel. We want to do something slightly different. But with that focus on data, our focus has been syncing up with federal data that is still live and active and that will be useful for local reporting. So for example, we collect all of the contract cancellations every single day from the federal government. And we pipe those into Slack channels state by state. So if I am at KQED radio today, I can look at the Slack channel and say, oh, this training's on it. And make it possible. I don't think anybody else is doing that. So that's another example of trying to provide the data in a way that's useful and usable. When we think about algorithms and tools, again, it's all about trying to make it easier to find noteworthy and newsworthy patterns. Agenda Watch does that. We are working with agendas and minutes, but then we're building out like an alerting system and a system to be able to find anomalies or patterns across agencies. I had my students a couple of years ago work with this corpus for Santa Clara County, and we did a mix of things. We pulled in ICE contracts across California, and California is a sanctuary state. There's not supposed to be any data sharing ICE contracts, but you know there are. And Santa Clara County says that it won't share data with ICE, but they have data sharing contracts. And in fact, they have more contracts with ICE than any other county in California. And buildings. So that was interesting to us. And so then we started using the corpus of those agenda minutes and transcripts and things like that, and digging into it and kind of with a journalistic perspective. And we found, sure enough, on the record, county officials proclaiming that they would not share data with ICE the same day that they signed a new contract with ICE. So we ended up doing a story for a local news organization that was, I think, really informed by that. And that's the kind of thing that we hope to see happen to watch, where you can really dig in and do some important stories, as well as just find out, oh, wait, they're going to build a new building there? Gee, that, you know, like that's something, there's going to be a hearing on this? We should know about that and get that news out to our journalists. Another example of again, algorithms and tools that are taking data and turning it into something usable is we just launched Ryan Pitts is in the back. He's our managing director. What is it? The Police Records Access Project. Thank you. We partner with Berkeley and the Berkeley Institute for Data Science, Berkeley Investigative Reporting Program. We also work a little bit with the Innocence Project, ACLU, which used to be anathema for journalists to partner with advocacy organizations. But we're not partnering on the stories. They don't get to see our stories. We're partnering on an underlying infrastructure that makes it easy for anybody to find police use of force and misconduct records. And so we launched this public-facing database that'll, with state-funded, with state funding, to be able to make it easy to find agency by agency every police use of force and misconduct case. And we don't have comprehensive in there yet, but we're continuing to build it up, and I think we have hundreds of thousands of documents. And we're building alerting systems out. We're building all kinds of other ways to publish that database out for news organizations to make it more accessible. So that's another example of like an algorithm and tool. We have these Slack notifications that I mentioned. Contract cancellations. What's more than contract cancellations? We track layoffs across the country every single day. We track problematic audits, fiscal audits. If you receive and I think it's changed now, $1 million. If you receive $1 million in federal government money, you have to concern letter. And that's the kind of thing that a bunch of other tools. We Decennial Census 2010 to 2020 that is embeddable. You can embed it to your local area. So let's say you're a report and you want to embed just the view of this county and how the demographics have shifted. You can do that with the census mapper. We did the same thing with during COVID, the case mapper. We had a New York Times style case visualization, but you could embed it at the local level. It was embedded over 10,000 times in local news outlets. And we have another tool that actually some of you might be interested in if you ever need a random sample of addresses. We call it USPS, like Postal Service, but it's called US Place Sampler. And you can actually go to any region and say, I'd like 200 randomly selected addresses, please, and you can get a CSV in seconds. So it's a really useful tool. And then we have the reporting recipes and training, which I kind of already discussed. I've seen like 3 distinct types of collaborations that have happened because that are kind of layer on top of this matrix. And so I kind of wanted to spin through a few of those. The first one is between academics and journalism. The second is between kind of global, international, or national journalism to local journalism. And then the third one, which is my favorite, I think, is local to national or international, depending on what the case may be, but in a kind of more diffuse way of spreading possible stories. So let's talk about the academic to journalism pipeline. During the pandemic, we were all working from home. I also, like many people, got a pandemic dog. I really wish you could see my slides now because I've got this great video of my dog playing with another little dog, a little poodly dog, who happens to belong to an education professor here, Professor Tom D. And so I didn't know Tom before the pandemic, but we were at the local school turned into a dog park, and our dogs liked each other. And so he said something like, I do education data, and I said something like, I do all kinds of data. And I talked with some folks some friends I knew at the New York Times, and we were like, we should figure this out. So I went back to Tom, and we decided super doable, but we did. Hi, Ron. Also, yeah, so Ron's actually been a huge part of, especially one of our more recent projects, and getting like, I have to. Spoke with them, talk to them. And I was like, okay, it's working. This is good. Like, that's what we want. So So that's the kind of thing where, like, like we the whole data set. We're like, here's your state, here's your district. You can download this. You can just use this tool. You can find that information. And we knew it had impact. It was named like as one of the top 10 collaborations of 2021. It was a nonprofit news award winner. I mean, like, okay, pat ourselves on the back. But I really think the fact that somebody else published a story out of the data was more important. And another thing that was more important was that a year later, the Associated Press said, hey, we think we should do some more with school enrollment data. And we went to the New York Times and said, hey, do you want to do more with school enrollment data? And they're like, no, we're good. We're busy. So funding this time, but we had collaboration. And so we went back and got a little less granular. And we particularly tracked the kids who were still missing after the pandemic, who never came back to school. And and Tom D helped us out again. And in this case, webinar newsrooms, and we're showing them how to analyze the data, and they're getting to their phone. You can interview Tom. And they're like, what? We have a national expert we can interview right now? So they got their quotes. They were all able to turn around a story in a couple of days, and the AP timed their national publication with these local newsrooms. So it had really good impact. In fact, that one was a Pulitzer finalist. More importantly, they actually found some kids who had gone missing. So again, like thinking about this intersection and how to build onto that matrix. So those are some examples of like the academic way of working. The last one I'll mention is called. I work with a professor here at Stanford named Monica Lamb. She's a CS professor, and funding from the Brown Institute for Media Innovation here at Stanford, and we built an agent that allowed us to query campaign finance records just through natural language, and it allowed you to see the structured query language at the same time and fact check it in real time against the FEC. So my students did that in partnership with local newsrooms, and we published 3 stories out of that tool in the fall quarter. And then another newsroom, the Maine Monitor, again, then my measure of impact is somebody else going to adopt it. They used the tool to tell their own story about campaign contributions in Maine. When we helped them fact check it, but they did the work and all of them, they came and said, hey, we want to do this. Now we're using Data Talk as a way we have a beta that allows anybody to upload any structured information and create their own agent. Information and instructions. Very helpful. The collaboration work was because we had a combo of really smart CS PhD students, Monica Lamb, a guy named Derek Willis, who's probably the preeminent campaign finance journalist in the U.S., basically saying, oh, no, you don't want to ask, no, you need to use this table, because it's very complicated and Byzantine, and as smart as the CS students were, they didn't know that world, but Derek did. So again, combining the expertise is really important when we think about that. So that's kind of like academic to national to local journalism. That like goes to that brain waste example that I talked about. We also worked with Reuters finance change, where we actually had one of our reporters work with Reuters, and then we hired her, and we looked at climate finance grants and loans and standardized it because it was just a hot mess, and made it usable, and then released the data and did the stories at the same time. My measure of impact on it's a nonprofit, not a journalism organization, no investigations, realized that this UN data is in terrible shape and said, well, we should keep that going. And so they followed our methodology and are continuing to update the clean data and release it. So those are examples of kind of going like national to local, and I think the USA Today example is another one of that. And then the last one is the local, so I kind of skipped through that one because I had already talked about it out of order because I didn't have my slides in front of me. But the last one is local to national. And so that one is the one that we just did in the last year with the New York Times. So Big Local News we have a partnership with the New York Times where we provide mentoring and training and resources and data journalism kind of resources to the New York Times Investigative Reporting Fellows. These fellows are local journalists who have been hired by the Times for a year to work on specific investigative projects. And the head of this investigative reporting fellowship is Dean Baquet, the former executive editor of the New York Times. And so we work with the local newsrooms, like they are at local newsrooms, but they're going to be publishing for their local newsrooms and in the New York Times. And so we were working with the Baltimore Banner on opioid, overdoses, and they did a great story about how the Baltimore is like the worst in the country for overdoses, and why is that, and what is the city doing wrong, and a lot of things that help explore how they could shift things. And as they did that, they got data from the CDC, very granular death record data that is not publicly available through an academic approval process. And so they got that very, very granular data, and they were able to look at, really do some very sophisticated analysis. And what they found was a cohort analysis. And what we found was that one group of older black men were dying at higher rates in Baltimore. So we did a subsequent story about that. As they did that story, I still remember sitting in this Zoom room and the reporter showing us the analysis. We realized this was happening not just in Baltimore, but it was happening in a lot of places. And I mean, how you're in a room and all of a sudden it gets really quiet and hushed because people are like, oh, we're on to something here? That's what that was like. Because it was happening in particular types of cities, industrial cities and port cities. So Boston, San Francisco, Seattle to some extent, Detroit, Chicago, Philly, Pittsburgh, DC, where this, I think I said Boston, where this one group, I think New Jersey was another one too. I can't remember where in New Jersey. There was this one group of older black men that had been dying at higher rates pretty much their entire adult lives. I mean, it was just like the overdose crisis, it just followed them. Part of this had to do with job loss, and then there's a whole lot of different reasons. But when we realized that, we didn't want to just do another big investigation in the New York Times and Baltimore Banner. We're like, this is really important data. So the CDC allowed us to roll it up. All of the cohort. We built the visualization for every single county. I really wish I had my slides. But just look at opioid overdose, Baltimore Banner, and New York Times, and go to the New York Times story because it's got some great visualizations. But essentially, we built something called a comet. We named it a comet chart. So how you have like Halley's Comet, you have the tail of the comet that stretches out. That's what the deaths look like. So if you have age, and then you have the year, and then there's this cluster of deaths for older black men for that age bin. And then you can just see it just kind of all the way across. And if you look at, and the one that's most telling, if you look at Chicago, for example, and you've got the older black men, and it's just this one big swath. And then you look at the view for white men, older white men, it's like, it's stunning. It just kind of takes your breath away. And nobody had reported on this. So we worked with 11 local news organizations, one of which has only 4 part-time reporters in DC, called the 51st. We gave them the data findings. We gave them the visualizations. We gave them a scrolly telly visualization that was patterned off the New York Times one. We fact-checked any other data analysis they did. We helped them with any other data analysis that they did. And then we would do these Zoom calls where we'd be like, do you want to partner with us? And they'd be like, what do you want? You're going to edit our stories. You're going to Bigfoot us. And we'd be like, we want you to have the data and tell a story. Well, do we have to tell it at the same time? No. Do we have to give you our drafts? No. I'm like, you can if you want to. We'd like it if you did, but you don't have to. And they were like, by the time we got to the end of the call, they were like, I think we want to partner with you. And so on one to national and kind of back again. So that's one of the more exciting things. And yes, it did win a Pulitzer Prize, for which
Well, thank you. To get data in place that would represent like we're there. And I guess what I'd like to ask you is to get your sense of
that's a great question. I think it's really, I think when you get into the, especially politics, it does, it can devolve so quickly into like, I think more on a person's individual life and like what matters to them. From the city and outside of the state, that might fill that vacuum.
we're not doing data sharing. Data showed that that day they had actually signed an agreement. What was the backlash or what was the outcome? Were they sort of like, oh, right now you often
Yeah, sometimes the tit for tat doesn't really actually help. And so, if and I don't recall if they gave us a comment or not. I know it was hard to get a hold of them, as you might imagine, the county officials. So I just don't remember if they gave us a comment. Uh, um, I think an immigrant involved somehow, or there was painted, but they're upset about to play, and then uh, other people who are engaged in that realm might then use that information to be able to say, uh, do you want to vote for this person or do you not want to vote for this person? That's up to you. But here's the context.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, our platform does require a log. Yes. Yes. So the stuff that's public is public, but we pretty much primarily go after public and open data. It's just that we bring it together in ways that other folks haven't, and I do think there is value in that data. And often it's especially the Agenda Watch. That's pretty much protected through the login, and right now it's not super accessible, but we provide it to the newsrooms in those other streams. The other part of it was how do we use AI? So I was actually on the steering committee for local news for the Partnership on AI and helped develop guidelines for how newsrooms should use AI or could use AI. Here, I would say we use AI where it can be reliable and public and open and transparent in terms of how we're using it, and if it can level us up in ways that we otherwise would not be able to do the work. We have hundreds of thousands of pages of documents of police use of force and misconduct. To manually review those would be and make sense of those. With Data Talk with Monica Lamb in the CS department, we're definitely using LLMs and RAG and all of those things. It's just that the more we can make it open source and transparent, so that you can fact check it, you can be sure that what you get back is verifiable or is verified. What we think about. data. The news judgment piece of it, that human in the loop idea, like it's going to be I'll revise it this way. How do you out that? We did an investigation at Times on open and public in Washington State, and disease and say it's a rare disease. A little girl who it was actually a form of leukemia, but it had been determined to be a rare disease. The pharmaceutical company charged $50,000 for a month of drugs, and the parents mortgaged their home so that she could have another month to live. And that was the top of the story. AI is not going to necessarily be able to know how to go find those parents, do those interviews, talk to the doctor, so that policy can be critical. Maybe we'll get there. Spend all the time cleaning and annotating and analyzing the data that we used to have to do because of AI. But AI is not going to get us to that little girl. So.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I've been reflecting. Sorry, and one last thing, so please. So sorry about that.